When it comes to the form factor of a phone, everyone is going to have their own preferences for things like height, like width, like thickness, like the weight. We're all going to have our own preferences, and each of these things are going to be weighted differently depending on what it is you actually do prefer. For me, when it comes to these folding phones, all I really wanted was to get to the point where we are about as thick as a standard phone when closed, and maybe just as importantly, where we weigh what a normal phone weighs. And I think that we have pretty much achieved that. Okay, so the Find N5 has achieved that. The Galaxy Z Fold 7 is going to achieve that. But it seems as though that is not good enough for some of these phone makers. They are ready to sail straight on past those goals, which I think were quite ambitious, and search for an even greater frontier. Today we are going to be talking about the Honor Magic V5. Some official images have been published. We're looking here on Android headlines, and would you just look at this thing? All right, let's start off by just diving into these images that Honor actually released. This text down here, Honor Magic V5, the body is thinner and the performance is stronger than expected. If we zoom in, we start to see some details that I think are just insane. So first off here, the camera bump. As you can see, it sort of tapers up just a little bit here in this region, and then there's the rest of the camera bump. It is thicker than the body of the phone itself. This is the shark jump moment, if you will. The shark is several hundred feet below us. We are flying overhead. We have officially jumped the shark. This is crazy. Look how insanely thin this phone is. Image number 2. The thinnest body and longest battery life are amazing. Some, translational errors there, but you kind of get the general idea. And again, this is like hard to even describe. This is a 4.2 millimeter thick device. When it's closed, it's closer to 9 millimeters. This is noticeably thinner than that. And again, look at this monstrosity of a camera bump. What Oppo did is they kind of downgraded their cameras a little bit to fit a smaller camera bump on this device. Honor is not doing that. They are still going full bore with the cameras. We'll talk about the rumored specs of those cameras here in a minute, but that means it's going to be a colossal camera bump, and that's just what we have. And then finally, Honor Magic V5, the folding flagship reduces the burden without reducing the configuration. I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that. Maybe they're saying they are reducing the thickness of the device without lowering the specs, and I think that that is fair. But this image might be the most telling, because if we scroll over here, yes, indeed, we can see that it flipping colossal camera bump, but we can also see the USB-C port. And we can also see the SIM tray. The SIM tray is effectively the full thickness of this phone. The USB-C port, there is almost nothing on either side of it. Again, I don't know how many more ways I can say this. This is insanity. Now, this is not going to be a perfect one-to-one comparison, but if we look at the Oppo Find N5 and we pay special close attention to that C port, which will be the same, that's a standard size, and then the SIM tray, which should be relatively close, you can really make out how big of a difference this is. And, okay, this is one of those things where it's a big difference and it's also a tiny difference, because we're talking about like fractions of a millimeter, but we're also talking about a device that many of us wondered, how much thinner can we really go? And the answer is, well, at least this much thinner, because Honor is doing this. And this is, I think, quite clearly a thinner device than the Oppo Find N5. I personally cannot wait to see what the Z Fold 7, how it compares to this in terms of thickness. Not because I actually want the phone to be this thick, because if I'm being honest, I don't really care. All I really needed was us to get about where the Find N5 was, and we've done that, and we've gone past it. So we have to start wondering, like, where did the diminishing returns begin to crop up? Maybe they already have, right? Like, maybe you would say that having a camera bump this big is a diminishing return. Are these devices going to start seeing more issues in terms of thermals, because there's just not as much physical space for cooling. There have to be diminishing returns at some point. Are they going to be easier to bend? Like we've seen with the S25 Edge, this is going to have to start happening at some point. And that's not even to mention the speakers, which we have also seen be downgraded on devices like the Oppo Find N5. How far do we need to push the thickness of these devices? It's technically incredibly impressive, and as a tech nerd, I am wowed by it. But does it really make that much sense? Let's turn our attention back to this article and talk a little bit about the rumored specs for this thing. We're talking about 16 gigabytes of RAM, as mentioned here. We're talking about a 6,100 milliamp hour battery, silicon carbon, of course, being used there. Absolutely crazy capacity for a battery in a device that thin. 66 watt fast charging is quite crazy. Some reports, they say, have indicated a 50 megapixel main camera and then a 200 megapixel periscope telephoto lens, and then some form of ultra wide as well going to be on that device. Really intrigued by this 200 megapixel periscope telephoto lens because it gives you so much resolution to digitally crop, to zoom in past the optical zoom. I think that's a really interesting idea. Now, the launch event for the Honor Magic V5 is supposed to be on July the 2nd, and that's going to be 7 p.m. local time in Shenzhen, China. So we are going to have to wait till then to hopefully find out about if there's going to be a global launch, a global ROM, what the pricing is going to look like, and therefore how easy it's going to be to import this thing over to the United States if you do want to go that way. Maybe you've been looking at that Z Fold 7, but you just saw this absolutely, what adjective have I not? I've said crazy, I've said insane, preposterous. This preposterous piece of hardware, maybe you feel like you absolutely just have to import this thing. You should have information on that sometime around July the 2nd with that launch event, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below because as impressive as this is, I really do genuinely feel like we are pushing to the point of where we have to start questioning, does this even make sense anymore? How thin does it need to be before it stops being an advantage and starts being a disadvantage? And I think that we might be getting close to that point, guys. I don't know what the point is beyond being thinner than a normal phone. Like, we're here. We are in normal phone range. So why do we need to go further than that at risk of sacrificing other things about the device? Maybe I'm just in my own head and you guys have answers to those questions. Drop those in the comments down below. Of course, as always, hit that subscribe button before you go so that you don't miss out on more content just like this. And I will see you next time in that content. And until then, stay nerdy, my friends.